Admiral Kresh stood in the command center of the Vrex warship, Dominant Fang, and looked at the blue-green planet below with cold satisfaction in his eyes. The planet was called New Tasmania by the humans who lived there, a colony world of farmers and miners who had settled this rock only 70 years ago. "Status report," Kresh demanded, and his second officer moved forward quickly. "3 settlements confirmed, Admiral. Population estimates put total humans at 47,000 across all locations," the officer said, while checking his data pad. Kresh made a sound that was close to laughter among his kind. 47,000 farmers," he said, with contempt clear in his voice. "The Galactic Collective wants this world for mining rights and resource extraction. They hired us to remove the human infestation." Another officer spoke up from the weapons station. "Admiral, standard protocol suggests a ground invasion with our regular forces. We could deploy 5,000 soldiers and have the world secure in 3 days." Kresh waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Waste of resources," he said firmly. "Why risk our soldiers against these primitives when we have other options?" The Admiral moved to the large viewing screen and pulled up files that made several officers shift uncomfortably. Everyone in the Vrex military knew about the Ravagers. Gen 7 Ravagers were the latest version of bioengineered war beasts, creatures designed in laboratories to be perfect killers that could adapt and hunt anything. They stood 8 feet tall on powerful legs, and their bodies were covered in armored scales that could deflect most small arms fire. Their jaws could crush steel, and their claws could tear through reinforced doors with ease. Most terrifying was their ability to regenerate wounds and adapt to new threats within hours. "The humans are classified as a low-tier species based on our intelligence," Kresh continued. "When the Collective made first contact 30 years ago, Earth was barely reaching out to nearby star systems. They had no real military to speak of, and their technology was centuries behind ours." He pulled up images of early human settlements that showed simple buildings and basic equipment. "These colonists are even more primitive than their homeworld. They grow crops and dig in the dirt like insects," Kresh said. "Deploying Gen 7 Ravagers will save time and resources while sending a clear message to other human colonies." The second officer hesitated before speaking. "Admiral, there are some reports in the database about human unpredictability. Several trade incidents where they responded in unexpected ways to standard diplomatic protocols." Kresh snorted in derision. "Unpredictable how? By crying and begging for mercy?" he asked mockingly. "Load the biopods and prepare for deployment. 3 pods with 200 Ravagers each, 1 for each settlement." The weapons officer began the launch sequence, while other crew members monitored the systems. "Biopods 1 through 3 are loaded and ready," came the confirmation. "Launch them," Kresh ordered without hesitation. 3 massive cylindrical pods detached from the warship and began their descent through the atmosphere. Each one contained 200 hungry and aggressive Ravagers that had been kept sedated during transport. The pods were designed to survive atmospheric entry and impact. Then they would open automatically and release their deadly cargo. On the surface of New Tasmania, warning sirens began to wail across all 3 settlements. In the capital city of New Brisbane, Colonial Governor Sarah Chen rushed into the emergency command center, where her staff were already gathering. "Confirmed," shouted the defense coordinator. 3 objects entering atmosphere. Trajectory puts them on direct paths to New Brisbane, Port Darwin, and Settlement 7. Sarah's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "How long do we have?" 30 minutes to impact, came the grim reply. She activated the colony-wide broadcast system immediately. "Attention all citizens of New Tasmania. This is Governor Chen with an emergency alert," she said clearly. "Unknown hostile forces are deploying weapons against our world. All citizens must evacuate to designated shelters immediately. This is not a drill. You have 30 minutes. Across the colony began running for safety, while Sarah, turned to her military advisor. "What are we facing, Commander Park?" she asked the former Earth Marine who now led their small defense force. Commander James Park studied the incoming data with growing concern. "The objects are too large to be missiles, and they're not slowing down like dropships would," he said while pulling up comparative data. "My gut says these are bioweapon deployment pods." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Bioweapons? Like engineered creatures?" Park confirmed. "It's a common tactic among Vrex forces. They use creatures instead of soldiers for colony suppression. Cheaper and creates maximum terror." The governor watched the countdown timer while her mind raced through options. She thought about Earth history and all the times humanity had faced seemingly impossible odds. Her grandfather had told her stories about old Australia and the Great Emu War, how the military had failed to control large birds because they underestimated animal behavior. But humans had learned from that embarrassment. Over 10,000 years, humanity had domesticated wolves into dogs and wild horses into cavalry mounts. They had trained elephants for war and hawks for hunting. Every time humans encountered a dangerous animal, they either learned to control it or learned to defend against it. "Commander Park," she said with sudden determination, "I want all personnel with xenobiology training, veterinary experience, hunting backgrounds, or animal handling skills to report to Research Station 7 immediately after the attack begins." Park looked confused. "Governor, we need fighters, not animal doctors." Sarah met his eyes with absolute certainty. "Commander, if they're sending beasts to kill us, then we're going to show them why you should never underestimate a species that turned wolves into pets," she said firmly. The first biopod struck the ground 20 kilometers from New Brisbane, with an impact that registered on seismic sensors. 2 more impacts followed, within seconds at the other settlements. On the warship above, Admiral Kresh watched with satisfaction as the pods opened and heat signatures began spreading outward from each impact site. "The Ravagers are active and hunting," reported the sensor officer. Kresh settled into his command chair with smug confidence. "Collective," he ordered. "They'll want proof that the contract has been fulfilled." Down on New Tasmania's surface, the Ravagers emerged from their pods hungry and aggressive after days of sedation. They caught the scent of prey and began moving toward the settlements with terrifying speed. But in Research Station 7, Governor Chen was already organizing her response team, while Commander Park evacuated civilians. She pulled up every file they had on Vrex bioweapons, while specialist personnel began arriving at the station. "People," she announced to the growing crowd, "we have about 20 minutes before those things reach the outer farms. I need everyone thinking about one question. How do we survive this?" A young man raised his hand. His name tag read Jake Torres, Wildlife Services. "Governor," he said nervously, "I worked with aggressive animals back on Earth. Predators and territorial species. They can be understood, even when they're—" Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Go on. If these creatures are designed to hunt, they'll have instincts and behaviors we can predict," Jake continued. "Every predator has weaknesses. We just need to find them." The governor smiled grimly. "Then let's get to work." The screaming started at dawn. The Henderson farm was one of the outlying homesteads in the agricultural valley. A family of 6 who grew hybrid corn and raised livestock for the colony. Robert Henderson was feeding his animals when he heard something moving through the cornfield with a sound like thunder. The stalks were 3 meters tall, but whatever was coming through them was taller. He grabbed his plasma rifle and ran toward the house while shouting for his family. The Ravager burst from the corn like a nightmare made flesh, 8 feet of scaled muscle and rage, with eyes that glowed yellow in the early light. Robert fired 3 shots that hit the creature's chest and barely slowed it down. The beast covered the distance between them in 2 seconds. Sarah Chen received the emergency call in the command center while the sun was barely above the horizon. Multiple attacks confirmed across the agricultural zone. Commander Park reported grimly, "We've lost contact with 4 farms: Henderson, Lou, O'Connor, and the Jackson homestead." The governor's hands clenched into fists. "Casualties?" "At least 47 dead," Park said quietly. "The defense teams we sent are reporting that standard weapons aren't working. The creatures absorb energy weapon fire, and their hides are too thick for ballistic rounds to penetrate effectively." Sarah pulled up live video feeds from drones flying over the attack zones. The Ravagers moved in packs of 5 or 6, coordinating like wolves, but with an intelligence that was clearly engineered. They didn't just kill, they adapted. They hunted with strategy and purpose. "They're adapting," observed Dr. Marcus Webb from his position at a research console. The xenobiologist had arrived at Research Station 7 an hour ago and was already analyzing footage of the creatures. "Look at this sequence," he said while pointing at his screen. Sarah moved closer to watch. The video showed a Ravager taking multiple hits from an energy weapon during the first attack. It had slowed and showed signs of damage. But in footage from 20 minutes later, the same type of weapon hit a different Ravager, and the creature barely flinched. "Their biology is rewriting itself in real time," Webb explained. "This is accelerated adaptation, probably genetic engineering at a level I've never seen before." Commander Park cursed under his breath. "How do we fight something that evolves to counter our weapons in hours?" Sarah's mind was already moving ahead. "Consume resources that fast. What's their metabolism like, Doctor?" Webb ran calculations on his screen. "Based on their size and activity level, plus the regeneration ability, I'd estimate they need to consume their body weight in protein every 3 days. So they'll be constantly hunting and feeding," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Which makes them predictable," added Jake Torres from where he stood, studying the footage. The young wildlife specialist had been analyzing the Ravagers' movement patterns since the attacks began. "They're hunting like pack predators from Earth," Jake continued. "See how they spread out to surround prey before attacking? That's wolf behavior, mixed with something else. Maybe reptilian territorial instincts." Sarah looked at the team assembled around her. Xenobiologists, hunters, veterinarians, animal handlers, and a few brave souls who just wanted to help. "We need a live specimen," she decided. "Or at least a dead one we can study. Commander Park, organize a kill team with the specific goal of bringing back a body." Park nodded and began issuing orders, while Sarah turned to the colony-wide communication system. "Attention all citizens," she broadcast. "Full evacuation to fortified zones is now mandatory. If you are not essential personnel, you must reach the shelters immediately." But even as she gave the evacuation order, Sarah was already planning the next phase. She wasn't going to just hide and wait for rescue. Over the next 3 days, the situation worsened. The Ravagers spread across the colony like a plague. They attacked anything that moved. Showed no fear of human weapons. The death toll climbed to 93. But on the 4th day, Commander Park's kill team finally succeeded. They cornered a Ravager that had been injured fighting over prey with others of its kind. The creature was already weakened when they hit it with concentrated fire from multiple angles. The body was transported to Research Station 7, where Dr. Webb began immediate dissection. "Fascinating and terrifying," Webb muttered as he worked. "The muscle density is 3 times what should be possible, and the skeletal structure is reinforced with a crystalline matrix." Jake Torres watched from behind protective glass while taking notes. "What about the brain?" he asked. Webb carefully opened the creature's skull and studied the neural tissue. "Highly developed frontal cortex," he observed. "These things are smart, probably equivalent to Earth dolphins or great apes in terms of cognitive ability." "Intelligence like that be redirected?" Jake asked carefully. Webb looked up sharply. "You're thinking about domestication?" Every predator humanity has ever encountered has been either domesticated or controlled, Jake said firmly. Dogs were wolves once. Horses were wild and dangerous. Even elephants and big cats have been trained. Sarah entered the laboratory at that moment and caught the end of the conversation. "Is it possible, Dr. Webb?" she asked directly. The xenobiologist considered carefully before answering. "Theoretically, yes. If we can identify their social hierarchy and biochemical communication systems, we might be able to influence their behavior." "But they're designed to be aggressive," Commander Park objected. "The Vrex engineered them specifically to kill." Jake shook his head. "Aggression can be managed. Fear can be redirected. Even the most dangerous animals respond to certain universal signals." Sarah made her decision then. "Decision. We try it. Dr. Webb, I need you to synthesize whatever chemical compounds these creatures use for social communication. Jake, you'll design an approach protocol." "Governor," Park protested, "this is insane. We should be focusing on defense and evacuation." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "Commander, if we can't stop these creatures, the colony dies. If we evacuate, we lose everything we've built here. But if we can control them, we turn the Vrex's weapon against them." Webb worked for 2 days straight, analyzing the Ravager's biochemistry. He discovered that the creatures used a complex pheromone system to establish pack hierarchy and territorial boundaries. Meanwhile, Jake studied video footage until he understood the body language and behavioral cues that indicated dominance or submission among the beasts. Human hunting teams began tracking the Ravager packs, identifying which individuals were alphas and which were not. Followers. They noticed something crucial. Not all Ravagers were equally aggressive. Some individuals were more cautious and defensive rather than purely hostile. The Vrex probably engineered multiple personality types, Webb theorized. Some alphas to lead attacks, and some followers to maintain pack cohesion. Sarah approved a bold plan they called Operation Wolfsbane. Human teams would target and eliminate only the most aggressive alpha Ravagers, while leaving the more cautious ones alive. The theory was that by removing the most dangerous leaders, the remaining Ravagers might become more manageable. It was incredibly risky, but it was better than waiting to die. Commander Park led the first strike team personally. They identified an alpha that had killed 17 colonists and tracked it to a den in the Rocky Hills. The fight lasted 4 hours, but they finally brought the monster down. Within a week, they had eliminated 9 aggressive alphas. The effect on the Ravager population was noticeable. Without the most violent leaders, the remaining creatures became more cautious and less coordinated in their attacks. That's when Jake Torres did something that everyone thought was suicidal. He approached a wounded Ravager. The Ravager, designated Beast 47, lay in a shallow cave with a broken foreleg and deep wounds across its back from fighting with a rival over territory. Jake Torres watched it from 30 meters away while wearing equipment that broadcast the synthesized submission pheromones Dr. Webb had created. "This is crazy," Commander Park said over the radio. "That thing will tear you apart." Jake kept his voice calm. Every animal behaviorist said the same thing about approaching wild wolves 10,000 years ago. He moved forward slowly with a pack full of raw meat from the colony's protein farms. Beast 47's head lifted, and its yellow eyes locked onto Jake with an intensity that made his hands shake. But he didn't run. Instead, Jake lowered himself into a crouch, making himself smaller and less threatening. Then he placed a chunk of meat on the ground and backed away. The Ravager watched him suspiciously for long minutes before finally dragging itself forward to sniff the offering. When the creature ate the meat, Jake felt a surge of hope that nearly overwhelmed his fear. "Step 1 complete," he whispered into his radio. It accepted food. For the next 72 hours, Jake returned to that cave every 6 hours with food and water. He never approached directly, and always maintained submissive body language while the pheromone broadcaster ran continuously. Beast 47 gradually stopped seeing him as a threat. On the fourth day, Jake sat down just 10 meters from the Ravager and began talking to it in a soft, steady voice. "I know you're scared," he said gently. "You were dropped on a strange world, and everything here wants to kill you, but I don't want to kill you." The creature tilted its head slightly, a gesture that looked almost curious. Jake pulled out more meat, and this time he didn't back away after placing it down. Beast 47 ate while watching him carefully. The end of the first week, Jake could sit within 3 meters of the Ravager without triggering aggression. By the end of the second week, Beast 47 allowed Jake to examine and treat its wounds with medical supplies. Dr. Webb monitored the entire process from remote cameras and analyzed every interaction. "It's working," he reported to Governor Chen with barely contained excitement. "The creature is forming a social bond with Jake, recognizing him as a pack member rather than prey." Sarah studied the video feeds with intense focus. "Can we replicate this with other Ravagers?" "I believe so," Webb confirmed. "We've identified 37 other individuals that show less aggressive tendencies. If we assign handlers to each one using the same protocol, we could have a domesticated population within a month." Commander Park was skeptical. "Even if it works, what good does it do us? We'll have 30 tame monsters, while 600 wild ones are still out there killing people." Sarah's smile was cold and calculating. "Then we use the tame ones to hunt the wild ones." The plan she proposed was audacious. Humans would bond with the less aggressive Ravagers, and then use those creatures to track, fight, and eliminate the remaining feral population. It was essentially using the Vrex's own weapons against themselves. Jake was hesitant when Sarah explained what she wanted. "Governor, I've formed a relationship with Beast 47 based on trust and care. Asking him to fight his own kind seems wrong." Sarah's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "Jake, those feral Ravagers have killed 163 colonists. They won't stop until we're all dead or they run out of food. Your Beast 47 can either help us survive, or we all die together." Jake looked at the Ravager, who now followed him like an enormous, deadly dog. Beast 47 had started responding to his voice commands, and even showed what might have been affection by pressing its massive head against Jake's side. "All right," Jake agreed finally. "But we do this carefully. I won't turn him into a mindless weapon." Over the next 3 weeks, 28 more Ravagers were brought into the domestication program. Some handlers succeeded quickly, while others struggled or failed entirely. 3 handlers were killed when they misjudged their assigned Ravager's temperament. But 25 successful bonds were established. The colonists began learning how to work with the massive creatures, feeding them, treating their injuries, and gradually introducing commands. Beast 47 became the prototype for training. Jake demonstrated how the Ravager would sit, stay, follow, and even attack specific targets on command. It was like watching someone work with a war dog, except the dog was 8 feet tall and could rip through steel. Then came the first joint operation. A pack of 5 feral Ravagers had denned in the ruins of the O'Connor farm and were using it as a base to raid nearby shelters. Commander Park organized a strike team that included Jake and Beast 47, plus 2 other handlers with their bonded Ravagers. "Remember," Jake instructed the other handlers, "we're not trying to exterminate them. We're establishing dominance and driving them away from human territory." The team approached the farm at dawn. The feral Ravagers detected them immediately and came out snarling and ready to fight. But they hesitated when they saw Beast 47 and the other domesticated Ravagers standing beside humans. The body language was all wrong from the feral's perspective. These should have been enemies, but instead they were clearly working together. Beast 47 roared, a deep resonating sound that Jake had learned meant dominance challenge. Largest feral alpha roared back and charged. What followed was brutal and swift. Beast 47 met the charge with his own attack, and the two massive creatures collided with bone-breaking force. But Beast 47 had been eating regularly and receiving medical care for his wounds, while the feral had been struggling to find food. The domesticated Ravager won the fight in under 2 minutes. The other ferals saw their alpha defeated, and their pack cohesion broke. They scattered into the wilderness. Commander Park watched in amazement. It actually worked. Jake patted Beast 47's scaled hide affectionately. Of course it worked. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. News of the success spread through the colony rapidly. Governor Chen immediately expanded the domestication program and began recruiting more handlers. Within 2 months, New Tasmania had over 300 Ravagers in various stages of bonding with humans. Handlers. The feral population was systematically hunted down or driven into isolated reservations where they could be monitored. Dr. Webb made another breakthrough when he successfully bred 2 domesticated Ravagers in captivity. The offspring are less aggressive by default, he reported excitedly. We're essentially creating a new subspecies, Gen 7 Ravagers, modified by selective breeding rather than genetic engineering. The colony's economy began adapting to the new reality. Ravagers were incredibly strong and could pull farming equipment through fields that vehicles couldn't navigate. They made excellent guard animals for outlying homesteads. Search and rescue teams used them to track lost colonists through the wilderness. And most importantly, they formed the core of New Tasmania's new military defense force. Jake Torres found himself promoted to captain of the Beast Rider Division, a cavalry unit that specialized in mounted combat. Using Ravagers, the creatures could run at speeds of 80 kilometers per hour, and their riders could fire weapons while mounted. It was like something from ancient Earth history, except far more deadly. Admiral Kresh watched all of this from orbit with growing horror and rage. His sensors showed heat signatures of humans and Ravagers moving together in organized patterns. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his science officer. The officer studied the data nervously. "Admiral, it appears the humans have domesticated our war beasts." Kresh's face went through several colors. Impossible. The Ravagers were designed specifically to be uncontrollable and hostile. Nevertheless, the evidence is clear, the science officer continued. The human colonists are not only surviving, but thriving. They've turned our biological weapons into agricultural and military assets. The Admiral's pride couldn't accept such humiliation. "Prepare a second deployment," he ordered harshly. "We'll send Gen 8 Ravagers, even more aggressive and with enhanced adaptive capabilities." His crew exchanged worried glances, but no one dared question the order. 500 Gen 8 Ravagers were loaded into new biopods. Down on New Tasmania's surface, Governor Sarah Chen received warning of the new deployment from her orbital sensors. She stood in the command center and read the data, while Jake Torres and Commander Park waited for her response. Finally she smiled, a cold, confident expression that made both men relax. "They're sending us reinforcements," she said calmly. Park looked confused. "Governor?" Sarah pulled up projections on the main screen. "We've domesticated 300 Ravagers from the original 600. We could use more for our expansion plans." Jake laughed in understanding. "You want to domesticate the Gen 8s too?" "Why not?" Sarah asked reasonably. "We've proven the process works. More Ravagers just means more resources for the colony." She opened a colony-wide channel. "Attention all citizens. The Vrex are sending more war beasts, but they're not sending them to attack us. They're sending them to join us." 3 months after the first biopod deployment, New Tasmania looked nothing like the agricultural colony the Vrex had targeted. Admiral Kresh stared at his orbital surveillance images with mounting disbelief and fury. The human settlements had expanded rather than contracted. New buildings were being constructed in areas that had been wilderness, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there were ravagers moving alongside humans like trained animals. "Show me the economic data," Kresh demanded through clenched teeth. His economic analyst pulled up trade manifests and production reports that the Vrex intelligence network had intercepted. "The colony is experiencing unprecedented growth," the analyst reported carefully. "They're exporting Ravager eggs to 6 other human colonies. Genetic samples are being sold to Earth universities for research, and they've begun manufacturing specialized equipment for Ravager handling." Clawed hand on his command console. "They're making profit from our weapons." "There's more, Admiral," the analyst continued nervously. "New Tasmania has filed official claims with the Galactic Collective for exclusive rights to Ravager breeding and training. They're calling it domesticated metafauna and treating it like livestock." The Admiral's face went purple with rage. On New Tasmania's surface, the changes were even more dramatic than orbital surveillance suggested. Jake Torres rode Beast 47 through the main street of New Brisbane, while colonists waved and children pointed excitedly at the massive creature. Ravagers had become normal, even commonplace, in daily life. Farmers used them to plow fields and transport heavy loads. Security forces employed them for patrol and deterrence. The scientific community was studying their regenerative abilities for potential medical applications. Into defensive operations. Captain Torres guided Beast 47 to the training grounds where his Beast Rider division was conducting exercises. 47 riders sat mounted on their Ravagers while practicing coordinated maneuvers. "Formation Delta," Jake called out, and the riders moved their creatures into a defensive circle with weapons pointing outward. The Ravagers moved with precision that would have made any cavalry officer proud. Dr. Marcus Webb watched from the observation platform while taking notes. "Remarkable," he muttered to Governor Chen, who stood beside him. "The bonding process has become so refined that new handlers are achieving success in just 2 weeks now." Sarah nodded with satisfaction. "What about the Gen 8 specimens?" Webb's expression brightened. "Even better than we hoped. They're more aggressive initially, but also more intelligent. Once bonded, they're actually superior to the Gen 7s in terms of trainability and task. Learning." The colony had captured and domesticated 170 Gen 8 Ravagers from the second deployment. The remaining 330 had been either eliminated or driven into the wilderness reserves. "We're creating a whole new industry," Sarah observed. "Other colonies are already requesting training programs and breeding stock." Commander Park joined them on the platform. "Governor, we have a problem. Vrex communications traffic from the warship has increased dramatically over the past week. Intelligence suggests they're calling for reinforcements." Sarah had been expecting this. They can't accept being beaten by livestock farmers and animal handlers. "My analysts think they're going to launch a full military invasion," Park continued grimly. "Real soldiers with real weapons instead of bioweapons." Webb looked worried. "Can we defend against that?" "Ravagers are formidable, but they're not invulnerable to military-grade weapons." Sarah's eyes were hard as steel. "That depends on whether Admiral Kresh understands what he's actually facing." 2 weeks later, 12 Vrex warships entered orbit around New Tasmania. Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of Dominant Fang and surveyed his assembled fleet with grim satisfaction. 5,000 soldiers are prepared for deployment, his second officer reported. Full combat loadouts with heavy weapons and armor support. Kresh opened a communication channel to the human colony. "Attention human colonists, this is Admiral Kresh of the Vrex Empire. You have violated Galactic Collective annexation protocols by refusing to evacuate and by stealing military property." Governor Chen's face appeared on his screen. She looked calm and almost amused. "Admiral," she said politely, "we haven't stolen anything. We've simply adopted some very aggressive animals that you abandoned on our world," Kresh snarled. "Those animals were engineered weapons worth millions of credits. You will return all surviving specimens immediately, or face military consequences." Sarah's smile never wavered. "The Ravagers are living creatures who have chosen to bond with human handlers. We're not returning them, and you have no legal grounds to demand it." "Then you leave me no choice," Kresh said coldly. "I am authorizing a full ground invasion. Surrender now, or my forces will take the planet by force." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, I strongly advise against this course of action. Your bioweapons failed because you didn't understand what humanity is capable of. Your military will fail for the same reason." Kresh cut the communication and turned to his officers. "Begin the invasion." Dropships filled with Rex soldiers began their descent toward New Brisbane. In the command center, Sarah watched them, approaching vessels on her tactical display. "All units to positions," Commander Park ordered over the military network. "Beast Rider divisions move to intercept coordinates. Ground forces establish defensive perimeters." Jake Torres was already mounted on Beast 47 at the head of his cavalry division. 400 Ravager riders formed up behind him, humans and beasts working as one unified force. "Listen up," Jake called to his troops. "The Vrex think they're invading a colony of farmers. Let's show them what happens when farmers have 8-foot war beasts as partners." Beast 47 roared in response, and 399 other Ravagers answered. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder. The first Vrex dropship landed in an open field and began disgorging soldiers in powered armor. They spread out in standard military formation while scanning for targets. What they found instead was 400 massive creatures charging toward them at 80 kilometers per hour with armed humans on their backs. The Vrex commander had approximately 3 seconds to register what he was seeing before the wave hit. Beast 47 crashed into the front line like a living battering ram. His claws tore through powered armor that was designed to withstand energy weapons, but not biological attack. The Vrex soldiers tried to fall back into defensive positions, but the Ravagers were already among them. Humans fired from mounted positions with deadly accuracy, while their beasts engaged in close combat. Energy weapons that had been designed for long-range warfare were nearly useless at point-blank range. The Vrex training emphasized formation fighting and coordinated fire, but formations couldn't hold when 8-foot monsters were tearing through their ranks. Within 10 minutes, the first landing force was completely routed. Survivors retreated back to their dropship, only to find that several Ravagers had circled around and damaged the engines. Admiral Kresh watched the disaster unfold from orbit with growing horror. "Second wave, deploy immediately," he ordered frantically. More dropships descended, but the result was the same. Humans had spent 3 months learning how to fight alongside Ravagers. They knew exactly how to maximize the creature's strengths while covering their weaknesses. Vrex soldiers were trained to fight other soldiers, not cavalry charges led by regenerating bioweapons. By the third wave, Kresh's forces were in complete disarray. Soldiers were refusing to board dropships because everyone could see what was happening on the ground. "Admiral," his second officer said urgently, "we're taking massive casualties, over 2,000 soldiers down, and we haven't secured a single objective." Kresh's pride wouldn't let him accept defeat. "Then we bombard them from orbit. If we can't take the planet, we'll destroy it." He began targeting the colony's population centers with his ship's weapons. Commander Park's sensors detected the weapons lock immediately. "Governor, they're preparing orbital bombardment." Sarah had prepared for this possibility. She activated every communication satellite in range and broadcast on all Galactic Collective frequencies. "Attention all Galactic Collective members," she said clearly. "This is Governor Sarah Chen of New Tasmania, The Vrex Empire is about to commit a war crime by bombing civilian population centers. We are transmitting this on all frequencies as evidence. Her broadcast was picked up by dozens of ships in nearby systems. Within minutes, diplomatic channels across the galaxy lit up with protests. The Galactic Collective Central Council received emergency notifications from multiple member species. Admiral Kresh found himself receiving urgent communications from his own government. Admiral, cease all hostile actions immediately. The Collective has issued a stop order. But Kresh was beyond reason. I will not be humiliated by primitive humans. His finger moved toward the firing control. That's when his second officer made a decision that would save thousands of lives. He grabbed the Admiral and physically pulled him away from the console while shouting, "Security, remove Admiral Kresh from the bridge. He's unfit for command." Within hours, a Galactic Collective peacekeeping fleet arrived in the system. The Vrex forces were ordered to stand down and return to their territory. And Governor Sarah Chen stood in her command center watching it all unfold, while Jake Torres and Beast 47 waited outside. "We won," Commander Park said, with something like awe in his voice. Sarah smiled. "We did better than win. We proved something important." "What's that?" Park asked. "That humanity doesn't just survive." Said firmly, "We adapt, and we turn every challenge into an advantage." The Galactic Collective Judicial Council convened an emergency session 3 days after the Battle of New Tasmania. Representatives from 47 species filled the chamber, while holographic displays showed evidence from the conflict. Ambassador Takora of the Collective's Peacekeeping Division presented the findings. The Vrex Empire deployed biological weapons against a civilian colony in direct violation of Galactic Convention 7. They then attempted orbital bombardment of population centers when their invasion failed. The Vrex delegation sat in uncomfortable silence. Their new commanding officer, Admiral Kresh, had been stripped of rank and arrested. Tried to offer justification. The humans refused to evacuate a world designated for resource annexation. Ambassador Takora's expression showed contempt. The annexation order was issued based on fraudulent resource surveys. We've discovered that the Vrex Empire falsified geological data to justify the action. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Furthermore, Takora continued while pulling up new displays. The humans of New Tasmania have filed counterclaims for damages, illegal military action, and attempted genocide. Governor Sarah Chen appeared via holographic projection from New Tasmania. She stood calmly before the assembly of galactic powers and spoke clearly. The Vrex Empire tried to exterminate 47,000 civilians because they wanted our world. When their bioweapons failed, they escalated to military invasion. When that failed, they tried to destroy us from orbit. The displays showed video of Ravager attacks, human casualties, and finally the orbital bombardment attempt. "How many casualties did your colony sustain?" asked a delegate from the Centauri alignment. Sarah's voice remained steady. 163 killed during the initial Ravager deployment. Another 49 killed in subsequent attacks, and 28 killed during the military invasion. "And how many Vrex casualties?" another delegate asked. 2,300 soldiers wounded or killed during the ground invasion, Sarah reported. 0 casualties from orbital bombardment, because they were stopped before firing. The mathematics were stark and impossible to ignore. The Vrex Empire had deployed overwhelming force against a civilian colony, and been defeated with minimal human losses. "How did you achieve this?" asked a delegate who seemed genuinely curious. Sarah's hologram smiled. "We did what humanity has always done. We adapted the threats against us and turned them into assets." She pulled up images showing Ravagers working in fields, patrolling with security forces, and carrying riders into battle. "The Vrex assumed we would panic and die when faced with bioweapons," Sarah explained. "But humanity has 10,000 years of experience domesticating dangerous animals. The chamber erupted in shocked discussion. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared in a second hologram to provide technical details. We analyzed the Ravager's biology and social structure, identified behavioral patterns, synthesized chemical communication compounds, and established bonding protocols based on proven animal handling techniques. "You domesticated military bioweapons?" a delegate asked in disbelief. "We domesticated wolves into dogs," Webb replied matter-of-factly. "We domesticated wild horses into cavalry mounts. We've trained elephants, hawks, and even large cats throughout our history. The Ravagers were just another challenge." Jake Torres appeared in a third hologram. He stood with Beast 47 visible beside him. The massive Ravager looked calm and almost gentle as it pressed its head against Jake's shoulder. "This is Beast 47, Jake introduced. "He was part of the first deployment. Tried to kill me when we met. My partner and friend." Beast 47 made a low, rumbling sound that seemed almost affectionate. The galactic representatives watched in stunned silence. Ambassador Takora addressed the council. "Based on the evidence presented, the collective finds the Vrex Empire guilty of illegal military action, deployment of banned bioweapons, and attempted war crimes." The Vrex delegation tried to protest, but Takora continued. "The Empire will pay reparations to New Tasmania in the amount of 500 million credits. Will surrender all claims to the New Tasmania system, and will face sanctions on military procurement for the next 10 standard years." The gavel came down and the verdict was final. But Takora wasn't finished. Additionally, the ambassador said while looking directly at Sarah's hologram, "The collective wishes to discuss New Tasmania's Ravager domestication program." Sarah nodded. "We're prepared to share our techniques and findings with interested parties." After P. "The Council recommends immediate classification update," Takora announced. "Humanity will be reclassified from low-tier species to high-tier species with specialization in adaptive domestication." P. More murmurs spread through the chamber. A delegate from the Zarathian hegemony spoke up. "Ambassador Chen, would New Tasmania be willing to consult on biological threat assessment? We've had persistent problems with invasive species on several colony worlds." Sarah smiled. "We'd be happy to help, for appropriate consulting fees, of course." Within weeks, requests were flooding in from across the galaxy. Species that had struggled with dangerous fauna wanted human expertise. Colonies facing bioweapon threats requested defensive training. Even military organizations were asking about Ravager cavalry tactics. New Tasmania went from being a simple agricultural colony to being the center of an entirely new industry. The University of New Brisbane established the first galactic center for animal behavior and domestication. Dr. Webb became the director and began training xenobiologists from dozens of species. Jake Torres found himself leading an elite training program for beast riders. Students came from across human space to learn the techniques. Commander Park expanded the Colonial Defense Force and began offering security consulting to other colonies. And Sarah Chen became not just governor, but also New Tasmania's representative to the Galactic Collective. 6 months after the battle, a formal ceremony was held in New Brisbane. The Galactic Collective presented New Tasmania with official recognition as a sovereign world with full trade rights and diplomatic status. Sarah stood on a platform before thousands of colonists and hundreds of Ravagers. "We came to this world to build something new," she said to the crowd. "The Vrex tried to destroy us because they thought we were weak." Beast 47 roared from where he stood beside the platform. "But they learned what every predator in Earth's history learned," Sarah continued. "Humanity doesn't run from threats. We understand them, adapt to them, and ultimately master them." The crowd cheered, while Ravagers added their voices to the celebration. In orbit, A new station was under construction. Tasmania Trade Hub would serve as a waypoint for ships traveling through the sector. Ravager eggs were being carefully packaged for export to 12 different colonies. Genetic samples were being shipped to research facilities across human space. And 3 warships from the human colonial defense fleet were establishing a permanent garrison to ensure New Tasmania would never be threatened again. Jake Torres walked through the settlement that evening, with Beast 47 following contentedly behind him. Children played in the streets without fear, while Ravagers dozed in the sun like enormous dogs. "Never thought we'd end up here," Jake said to his companion. Beast 47 made a questioning sound. "When those pods first dropped, I thought we were all dead," Jake continued. "But Sarah was right. We just had to do what humans do best." He stopped at a memorial wall where the names of 240 colonists were engraved, those who had died in the first days. The attacks and battles. "We lost good people," Jake said quietly, "but their sacrifice meant something. We proved that humanity belongs out here among the stars." Beast 47 gently nudged Jake's shoulder with his massive head. In the administrative center, Sarah Chen met with another delegation. This one from a species called the Rakthari. "Governor Chen," their representative said nervously, "we have a situation on one of our colony worlds. Aggressive predators that our people cannot control. We've heard of your success with the Ravagers, and wondered." Sarah gestured to a chair. "Tell me about these predators. Biology, behavior, habitat preferences." As the Rakthari began describing their problem, Sarah was already thinking through solutions. Meanwhile, Dr. Webb was analyzing genetic samples from the Rakthari predators that had been sent ahead. And Jake was preparing a team of beast riders who could travel to the Rakthari colony as consults. The system they had developed on New Tasmania was becoming a template. Elsewhere in the galaxy, military academies were updating their training materials. A new case study appeared in strategic planning courses across dozens of species. The New Tasmania Incident, Analysis of Human Adaptive Capabilities. Young officers studied the battle recordings and tried to understand how a civilian colony had defeated a professional military force. The conclusion was always the same: never underestimate humanity's ability to weaponize anything, including the weapons used against them. In the Vrex Empire's military headquarters, new regulations were being written. Regulation 7749B stated clearly, biological weapon deployment against human-controlled worlds is strictly prohibited. Human populations have demonstrated unprecedented ability to domesticate and control engineered organisms. The regulation became known informally as the Never Again Rule. Admiral Kresh sat in a prison cell and watched news broadcasts about New Tasmania's success. He had lost everything: his rank, his reputation, his freedom, because he had underestimated a species of farmers. The irony wasn't lost on him. On New Tasmania, life continued to evolve in fascinating ways. The second generation of domesticated ravagers were being born, creatures that had never known a feral existence. They were gentler by nature, but still retained their incredible strength and abilities. Human children grew up playing with Ravager hatchlings. Teenagers learned to ride them the way previous generations had learned to ride horses. And scientists continued discovering new applications for Ravager biology. The regenerative capabilities were being studied for medical breakthroughs. The adaptive evolution mechanisms were revealing secrets about genetic engineering. Even their pack social structures were teaching researchers about intelligence and cooperation. Sarah Chen stood on a hill overlooking New Brisbane 5 years after the first biopods had fallen. The city had grown to twice its original size. Farmland stretched to the horizon, with Ravagers working alongside human farmers. And in the distance, she could see the training grounds where new beast riders were learning their skills. Jake Torres joined her with Beast 47. The creature was older now, but still strong and loyal. Hard to believe it's been 5 years, Jake said. Sarah nodded. The Vrex wanted to wipe us out. Instead, they gave us the tools to become one of the most influential colonies in the sector. Think they regret it? Jake asked with a grin. Every single day, Sarah replied. Beast 47 made a sound that was remarkably close to laughter. Below them, a new monument was being unveiled, a statue showing a human and a Ravager standing side by side. Inscription read, "To those who survived the invasion, to those who fell defending our home, and to those who prove that humanity will never surrender." Ambassador Takora attended the ceremony via holographic projection. New Tasmania has become a symbol, the ambassador said in her speech. A reminder that strength comes not just from weapons or numbers, but from adaptability and determination. The crowd applauded, while Ravagers roared approval, and across the galaxy, other species watched and learned. They learned that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or underestimated. They learned that humans would find a way to survive anything thrown at them, and most importantly, they learned one simple rule that would echo through galactic military doctrine for generations. Never let mutant war beasts be dropped on a human planet, because humans will just make them into pets.